Strange and Scary Mysteries of the Month, January 2018. Strange and Scary Mysteries of the Month is a compilation of the weird, disturbing, and downright baffling stories currently happening in our world. From UFOs and serial killers, to ancient sites, mysterious creatures, and even ghosts, these are the Strange and Scary Mysteries of the Month for January 2018. Number 5. Kayak Killer Released from Prison. If you asked 37-year-old Latvian national Angelika Graswald to describe what she felt when she watched her fiancé, Vincent Viafore, drown, she'd say it was euphoric. On April 19, 2015, the couple went kayaking on the Hudson River just outside New York City, but Viafore had disappeared when it was time for them to return. Apparently, his kayak had capsized in the cold, choppy waters, and it would take a month before his body was finally recovered. Dubbed as the Kayak Killer, Angelika admitted to pulling the drainage plug on her boyfriend's kayak. During police interrogation, she was quoted as saying, "I wanted him dead, and now he's gone, and I'm okay with it." After the incriminating statements, just 10 days after the incident, she was arrested. She faced a murder charge for the crime but received a lesser sentence after agreeing to a plea deal by admitting to guilt to criminally negligent homicide. She was then ordered to serve just 16 months to 4 years in prison. Since her arrest in April of 2015, Angelika had been in jail and her time behind bars was counted as time served. As a result, this killer was then released just a few days prior to Christmas this year. Prosecutors and the DA weren't happy with the deal, but they felt the chances of getting a conviction for the case was increasingly difficult because of Angelika's conflicting statements. She apparently told the court that she was pressured to admit to the crime. Investigators also extensively tested whether removing the plug on a kayak would result in it capsizing, but the results were inconsistent. After Angelika's release, her lawyer stated that she wanted to speak with her family in Latvia and reconnect with them. She's now attempting to get her life back on track. After serving her 16 months, there's a possibility she will be deported back to her native land, but either way, this killer will be a free woman. Number 4. Man spontaneously combusts. Stories of spontaneous human combustion are rare, and many people believe them to be tales of science fiction. But one man in London could prove that this strange phenomenon is in fact very real. 70-year-old John Nolan died from horrible burns close to his home in North London in September of 2017. The most baffling thing was that the pensioner caught on fire while he was on the street and with no obvious source of fire to be found. Spontaneous human combustion has baffled and captivated people over the decades. This idea of a person catching fire with no apparent cause is scary, but also very fascinating. Over the years, there have been more than 200 cases reported, and in most of them, the person is often found burnt, almost with total destruction of the body, but with minimal damage to the surrounding area. In literature, Charles Dickens even assigns one character, the alcoholic crook, to combust without any apparent reason. While scientists suspect the most likely cause of the phenomenon is alcohol in the body, the source of ignition is still hotly debated. Others point to the wick effect, wherein the victim's clothing soaks up the melted fat, which actually helps insulate the fire and keep the area around unharmed. One of the most famous cases was in 2011, when an Irish coroner proclaimed that 76-year-old Michael Faherty had spontaneously combusted and died as a result. His body was found close to a fireplace. It was badly burnt, but authorities pointed out that the fireplace wasn't the source of the flame. In the case of John Nolan, he was described by family as a gentle and nice man. The police found no accelerants in his body, and the fire investigators could not pinpoint a source of ignition. According to his family members, he had suffered horrific burns that included all of his internal organs. His nephew stated his head and face were swollen and that his hair had been burnt off. The former construction worker was airlifted to the Colchester Hospital where friends and family gathered prior to his death. The case still remains open. Initial eyewitnesses mentioned Mr. Nolan was not in contact with anyone when he caught fire. Police and investigators are currently appealing for more witnesses to come forward to help them solve the mystery of Mr. Nolan's strange death. Number 3. 11-year-old girl in prison for mother's killings. Jails are meant to hold criminals, but the prison systems in Afghanistan work a bit differently. In Jalalabad, a young child can remain in prison for crimes of their mother. At 11 years old, Meena doesn't know what the outside world looks like. She's lived inside the walls of Nangarhar Provincial Prison in Jalalabad, Afghanistan all her life. Her crime? Her mother, Shirin Gul, is a convicted serial murderer and is serving a life sentence. In Afghanistan, a child can be kept inside the prison to live with their mothers up until they are 18. This is especially true if there are no other relatives to care for the child, or if the mother refuses to let them out. While non-government programs for children whose mothers are imprisoned are around, these are limited to certain areas and unfortunately not present in Jalalabad. While this prison has a single classroom with 3 grade levels taught to children, it's still a prison, with tall walls and barbed wire fences surrounding it. Meena is quiet and soft-spoken. She's never seen the outside world, and while she does desire to see it, she will not leave without her mother. In contrast to her mild demeanor, her mother Shirin is an outspoken and brash woman. She was sent to jail together with her common-law husband, their son, her brother-in-law, uncle and nephew for committing up to 27 murders between 2001 and 2004. Officials discovered that she would work as a prostitute, luring mostly cab drivers to her home before serving them kebabs laced with drugs. Afterwards, her family members would then kill, rob, and bury the men in the yards of their 2 family homes. According to prosecutors, it was Gul that was the ringleader of it all. All of the men were sentenced and hanged, but apparently Gul got pregnant, which delayed her hanging. Eventually, her death sentence was commuted to life in prison. It's possible that Gul was impregnated by a prison guard, with some even accusing her of purposely getting pregnant to avoid being hanged. In the end, it's likely Meena won't be able to set foot outside of the prison until she turns 18. By then, the decision to leave will be hers. Number 2. Troy family murder. In Troy, New York, the police have called the murders the worst they've ever seen. Just a day after Christmas, a property manager was asked to do a welfare check on a family of 4 when he discovered the gruesome scene in a basement apartment in upstate New York. The family consisted of 36-year-old Shanta Myers, her 11-year-old son Jeremiah, 5-year-old daughter Shanice, and Shanta's girlfriend Brandy Mells, who was 22. All of them had been killed. They were bound and gagged, and each one had their throats slashed. According to anonymous sources not linked to the investigation, the 2 children were discovered in a kneeling position together with their heads and chest on the bed. One of the women was found on a mattress on the floor. The other female was nearby and had been covered with a sheet. It appears that the family was purposely targeted in a vicious attack, but authorities are still unsure why. The only surviving member of the family is 15-year-old Isaiah, who was away living with an aunt when the incident happened. Police say the victims were killed on December 21st and had been dead for 5 days before their bodies were found. For days, police investigated and through various tips were able to catch suspects Justin Mann and James White. The 2 were brought to the station for questioning and then detained and charged with 1 count of first-degree murder and 4 counts of second-degree murder. Although it's unclear as to the reason for the killings, it's believed that Justin was an acquaintance of Brandy's. Both men have had a prior history of violence and have served time in the state's prison system. Justin was behind bars for first-degree robbery, while White was in prison for first-degree manslaughter. White, along with 2 others, had forcibly entered an apartment, grabbed a victim by the neck and told one of the other men to stab the 19-year-old. Both suspects pleaded not guilty on their arraignment, but the case is currently just getting underway. Number 1. Pentagons UFO program. In a way, it's the official confirmation UFO enthusiasts have been waiting for. Out of the yearly $600 billion defense budget the Pentagon receives, $22 million of that was spent on a program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. To put it simply, the Pentagon hunted down and investigated UFOs. For decades, the government has either kept mum about the subject of UFOs and tried their best to make it seem like they weren't interested. Thus, most UFO sightings were either explained away as unusual aerial phenomena, delusions, or even weather balloons. But according to records obtained by the New York Times, the Pentagon has investigated several reports of unidentified flying objects and interviewed those involved. The department was run by a military intelligence officer by the name of Luis Elizondo. What's fascinating is that despite the Defense Department admitting the existence of the program, they claimed it was shut down in 2012. However, many believe that claim is false and that officials continue to investigate UFOs and report their findings to their superiors even today. More recently, the program had a spotlight focused on it when a former employee who has since retired from the unit openly spoke out about his role in it. Two crucial videos taken by U.S. military have also been released to the public, causing many people to say that this is essentially the acknowledgement by the government that aliens exist. The first video is called the gimbal video, and it shows a dark object on a radar screen. You can hear one of the pilots of an FA-18 Super Hornet fighter jet proclaim, "That's a fucking drone." Then another responds, "There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the SA," referring to the radar display. The other person responds with, "My gosh." The video shows the object flying before it begins to rotate. The pilots watching are equally fascinated at what they are seeing, but don't seem to have any explanation as to what exactly they're looking at. Two other Navy pilots have also come forward to share their experience with these unusual UFOs. In November of 2004, Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slay were on a routine training mission over the Pacific when they received a transmission from the Navy cruiser USS Princeton asking if they had weapons on their craft. They replied that they only had dummy missiles that couldn't be fired. Nevertheless, the operator told Commander Fravor about an unusual craft they had been tracking for close to 2 weeks. The two fighter planes were then asked to investigate. Once they reached the location, they couldn't spot anything unusual, and there was nothing on their radar as well. However, when Commander Fravor looked down at the sea, he noticed that despite the waters being calm, the waves somehow broke over something sitting on the surface. That's when he noticed that around 50 feet from the churn of the waves was a whitish aircraft. It was about 40 feet long and oval-shaped. He attempted to get closer, but halfway through, the craft started moving and rising up as if to meet him. Then suddenly, it peeled away at a great speed and disappeared. In the second video, called the 2004 Nimitz video, you can see the jet sensors tracking a white object. It remained almost static with slight sudden movements, but right before the end of the video, the mysterious object suddenly veers left at unprecedented speed. The pilots relayed the info to the operator, who were asked to proceed at the cap point. While the fighter jets were still 40 miles away from there, the radio operator told them it had picked up the mysterious craft on the radar again and told them it had reached the cap point, just a few minutes from when it left their sight. Once the jets got there, there was nothing to be found. The pilots eventually returned to the Nimitz aircraft carrier. Commander Fravor's superiors never investigated his encounter any further, and he went on with his career before retiring. For decades, people have been wanting the government to stop denying they are studying UFO phenomenon. With the release of this U.S. military footage, it seems apparent they're finally easing up on their stance. Every day we encounter scary and mysterious stories that most of us don't know what to make of. These are just a handful, but there's still so much more to discover. If you enjoyed this video, then remember to subscribe to our channel. We have many new scary mysteries coming out every single week that we're sure you'll enjoy. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.